this panel discussion is going to be on the topic of deal making in a global context. That sounds like a very broad topic. So, but in essence, we want to talk about a little bit more about what Jonas was touching on in his presentation here, what the Nordic growth stage biotech or pharma or medtech companies need to consider and to prepare for when expanding internationally in order to successfully form partnerships, strike deals, of course, and possibly attract investors as well outside of the Nordics. And with me to discuss these things, important things, I have a distinguished panel of 3 people here with me from, well, slightly different angles coming into this discussion. Over here we have Hans Jeppsson, CFO from Vicore Pharma. Welcome, Hans.
Thanks.
In the middle we have Jens Lindberg, CEO of Medivir. Welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for calling me distinguished.
And then to my left we have a figure I think most of you who are based in Lund are very familiar with, called Borrebaeck, professor and serial entrepreneur. I want to tap into your vast knowledge and experiences when it comes to driving companies forward and taking them out in the world, because that's what you have done and are trying to do. And I would like to start with you, Carl, if it's okay. You have the mic there. You are a professor. Do you agree with Johan's assessment about the teacher's exemption?
I mean, I think it was a great speech by Johan, but obviously it was quite wrong with the conclusion, because I spun out 5 companies from my research, which is mostly cancer immunology. And I could have done that without the teacher's exemption. We can go into a lot of discussion with this, but I think times are changing, so the universities are getting better and better. But when we spun out the first company, the university didn't know what commercialization was. So, hooray for teacher's exemption.
That was it was a little bit of an open goal there, having you on the panel.
I know.
So. When you come as far as coming out of academia, you have an idea. Jens, with Medivir, you can of course please start out by just saying in the shortest elevator pitch you ever held, what the audience, what you do, and what focus area you're in, and then it would be really interesting to hear what the sort of the biggest challenge you have faced to get to where you are with Medivir today, and how you have overcome that.
Ooh, that could be a very long story. The short version on the first one, on the back of the obesity pandemic, liver cancer will become an epidemic, and we're trying to sort of change the way liver cancer is treated, i.e. trying to treat the cancer in the liver, and we're the only ones trying to achieve that. I mean, and I won't do the long version on Medivir. We have the approach we are taking is that sort of in the number of assets we have, we made a decision that we are going to drive development of one of those assets ourselves, and then the other ones we are trying to find a partner for, and we have successfully found partners for most of them, where a few of them are still in-house. And so those are the kind of 2 approaches we're taking. With the lead asset, we will also be going down the partnering route at a certain point of time, because as a small company, we don't think that it's the right way to bring it all the way to the market. So we will be looking for partners in that respect as well. The partner might look a bit different in terms of what we're looking for, but that's our approach.
And speaking of challenges, having, like you said, you have formed partnerships already, and you have a clear strategy of when you will try to form a partnership with your lead asset. But having gotten this far, in your time as CEO of the company, what would you say have been your toughest challenge?
But then I'll go back to what Johan said, and sort of in terms of the trough and the timeline, etc. I think that the timing of when you explore that partnership, when you reach out, is it's a challenging element, because what might be a good timing for me might not be a good timing for a potential partner, and you only get one chance to make a first impression. So in terms of when do we go, because I don't want to go too early. Data might not be good enough, might be too early. You don't want to go too late, because then you lose momentum in terms of moving towards markets. I think that when is the perfect time to do it, both from my end and also in terms of what I think that potential partner will be looking for. So timing.
Sounds like when my youngest son is giving me driving direction. Is that not now, not now, now? That's when you turn. So Hans, you fairly recently with Vicore Pharma did strike a deal with a Japanese company. Timing is of the essence, obviously. Can you walk us through the timeline of that deal in brief, if you will?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we were fortunate to be able to strike a deal in earlier this year with a Japanese company, NS Pharma, in Nippon Shinyaku, and we are in the field of idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. They are experts in PAH, which is nearly closely related indication. I think they founded Uptravi, a big selling drug in that field. So it took some time to find that optimal partner, which we think is a very good partner for us. And it takes time. I think that's one learning lesson. If the board pushes you to strike a deal quickly, you have to push back. It really takes time. I think we started out those discussions over a year ago before striking the deal. Some, I think, interesting components of that deal is that we brought in a new CEO, or the board decided to bring in a new CEO in September last year. Ahmed Musa, formerly at Peris in the US, is Boston-based, and he has a very strong deal-making background, $1 billion of total deal value. So he, of course, contributed a lot into those finalization of those discussions in the deal. I think also which is public from the press release, he brought in one advisor, Steve Engen, which is kind of when we had those discussions in JP Morgan earlier this year, very late stage, we understood that he's a big name there because they called him son, Steve Engen, but didn't call the other in the room Steve Engen, and he knows, of course, fluent Japanese, speaks fluent, and was, of course, instrumental in closing that deal. So that was very, very important.
Mm-hmm. So having someone by your side guiding you through the negotiations, so on, could be a key as well, of course. Carl, I was going to ask you, having, like you said, spun out or formed several companies, you have within different fields as well, both medtech and biotech, and also now digital health. I mean, I'm fairly sure that there are different challenges, but depending on which field you're in, so to speak. But in your most current endeavors with Pain Drainer, could you give us a brief sort of encapsulation of where you are right now and what has been toughest in bringing you to that point?
Yes, I mean, my experience goes way back. So we started with pharma, then diagnostics, and now digital therapeutics. And I mean, there's so many differences and different ways to market, different way to do the deal, and different amount of money you need for the deal. I mean, the main challenge for digital therapeutics is that Sweden is totally immature regarding digital implementations, and even though the wording is different when you hear it. So what we've done is over just a few years develop a product which in pharma, obviously, as you know, takes 10-15 years, and in diagnostics maybe 6-7 years. So the speed has been tremendously much faster, The amount of money we need is much less. The challenge is the commercialization because of, again, the immaturity of sort of how should we implement digital therapeutics. So what we've done is we've gone to the US and used my network and tried to find what we call islands of acceptance on the East Coast, a couple of big health organizations. Digital therapeutics is a volume sale. We need maybe a couple of thousand out of the 5 million patients there are to reach break-even. So, and also if we can get one of the big ones, you know, there are Cleveland Clinic, there are Brigham, and there are a number of these big ones, then we can see that we also can get the next one. It's like investors. The first one is tough, the second one is a little bit easier, the third one comes automatically. It's the same and you can actually do this pretty much by yourself. Of course, if you can have someone who is you know, very familiar with the US market and so on, it helps. And there are ways of getting that, but it's completely different to the diagnostics and pharma. So it's more of a scaling now. We try to scale Pain Brain.
Yeah. And have you formed any specific partnerships then in order to open doors for you in the US, or did you solely rely on your personal network in that sense?
Well, initially it's been personal networks, but then it's like, what do you call it, ringar på vattnet, wakes on the water, whatever. And we have some really high-level key opinion leaders, which are physicians, and they help us a lot by introducing us to the next and to the next and to the next. So from that point of view, we have, from a scientific point of view, or whatever you want to call digital therapeutics, a very strong support. But then you walk right into the, let's say, Presbyterian Hospital, you walk right into the bureaucracy and the administration, and that's pretty much the same for all and that takes time. It's not impossible at all, but it takes time. And investors, which we mostly use the family offices in the beginning, always want us to do quicker, obviously, but it takes time. But it's going in the right direction, absolutely.
That's great. So Jens, have you had any experience in strategic partnerships when you look at China, for example, as a specific market which you are interested in? I'm pretty sure.
I was going to say, don't say China, because that is not an area we're focusing on at the moment, but that's okay.
Okay, my bad. But what type of partnerships have been crucial in your international growth strategy?
I mean, at the moment, there are two types of partnerships that we've looked for, and up until this point, it's been focused on finding homes for the assets that we are not sort of focused on ourselves, that we're not driving. Whereas at the moment, now we're looking more sort of for what Hans and Vicore has done with regards to finding a partner to co-develop and commercialize. So we've been in that. And though there we look for different partners. Sort of in the latter part, I'm looking for maybe a bigger name for the validation, for the expertise, for local regulatory capabilities, so on and so forth. Whereas on what we've done so far, the company I'm looking for is slightly different. Then it's more important that this asset sort of it fits well with sort of clearly their priorities. It becomes an important asset for them that sort of maybe their top priority, so they spend time on it, etc. So because I will kind of leave it be. So I will be looking for a different type of companies, and then clearly from a geographic point of view, it depends on the disease area where I focus.
So having that strategic mindset, does that sort of exclude the biggest companies? Are you more looking into specialist partners?
I would never say exclude, but sort of on the first topic, yes, I would sort of more focus on maybe smaller companies, sort of clearly well-resourced, hopefully, but sort of where this becomes something that is important for them, critical, not something that they can sort of, we focus on our other things. If there is a sort of a kind of a finance crunch, because we see that with some of the bigger biotechs in the US as well. They might have a lot of money, but they still need to be a bit conservative, and if you're not top, then you get put on hold.
And so going out in the world and trying to, trying to connect, trying to open doors, trying to find partners, and hopefully also get into negotiations with partners. As Hans was telling, the cultural nuances or the cultural differences can be extremely important to keep track of and to know how they can impact your negotiations and so on. Can you share any examples of when cultural nuances has become a problem for you, or something that you were aware of that, oh, I'm very, very Swedish in this context?
Not any sort of very clear specific. We try to adapt to some extent in terms of where we go. So if there is a US sort of US company or US counterpart, then we do try to, and now I'm looking at Johan again, to try to be a bit less Swedish maybe, be a bit more bullish, sort of a more taking a stronger approach. Whereas if we go to Japan, we know that sort of maybe we will adapt, sort of be slightly less bullish. We know that it takes longer time in Japan, so I can't push the process just as much. So we do try to adapt, but then I can't adapt too much because I am Swedish and we are Swedish, and there's a little bit of sometimes an expectation of, and we're going to work together going forward. So I kind of have to be somewhat transparent on who we are, how we operate, and what values we have, because otherwise the collaboration's not going to work going forward. So some adaptation.
You need to be true to yourself, basically.
Yeah, but Hans' point on the timing is an element that we've had to sort of remind ourselves of many times. Sort of like in certain parts of the world, it does take a bit of time, and don't push too much. Just kind of trust the process. It is moving along.
So, Carl, have you, having then leveraged your personal network in the US, for example, have you experienced, are there differences that you can say are, have been a hindering, or do you feel half American in that sense?
I think you have to adapt, but as Johan was saying, the customer is always right. So when I've experienced from China, Japan, South Korea, and US, and you sort of go into the different role. I mean, in Japan and China, it takes forever to do a deal. In South Korea, it's something in between, and in the US, it's actually quicker. But I don't think it's as long as you're aware of what they expect of you, I don't think it's a major problem. You have to be an amoeba, you just change.
Being an amoeba, that's concrete advice. We do have representatives from the US, from Japan, and from China that will be participating in the program, and hopefully we will learn even more than about how it actually works there. So international growth, it doesn't sound cheap, and I'm pretty sure it isn't cheap. So financing this growth must obviously be part of the headache, so to speak. And I know that Hans, with Vicore, you've had I wouldn't say luck. I would say that you have the fortune to have brought in some fairly big international investors. Would you like to tell us a little bit about how easy that was?
Yeah, we were very fortunate to bring in, we closed a financing transaction in June last year, so brought in OrbiMed and Surreta US investors. OrbiMed is probably it's a top tier, maybe top 3 in the world, so extremely fortunate to have them on board. We didn't convince them overnight, of course, so it takes time. Slightly longer than it took to strike the deal with NS Pharma. So I think we met them first during the fall of 2018. So I met them quite a number of times over the years, many meetings, and finally we were able to get them on board. We're also, we are backed with peer to Johan's Sound and Philip's Sound Bioventures health cap. So we're very fortunate to have them on board. They came in Vicore 2018, so have been very active in the company. So if you are able to get those types of venture investors in the company, that's will make life easier. It's not easy as a biotech CFO, but that will make it easier because they are very active. They open up their network, professionalize the companies across a number of dimensions, and make introductions. And those interactions are very, very important. But very happy to have Orbimed on board, and that is part of our trajectory going forward to starting. We brought in, as I mentioned, the US CEO. We have new US board members joining the company at the last month. Or very recently. So going into a global phase 2B study now, including centers in the US. So we're really moving towards that direction, and part of that journey is to bring in US investors. And those are typical investors who do not invest like venture investors, one investment and that's it. So hopefully to be part of a future journey as well.
I do believe we have Health Cap in the room. So a little later we'll have an arm wrestling with Sound Bioventures and Health Cap out in the lobby. That you can place your bets later. Having landed on these big US investors, you mentioned that you met them in 2018 the first time. How many times during the years of meetings and talks with them were you close to giving up on them?
Many times, I would say. I'm a long distance runner, but even I start to consider because if they turn down the opportunity to invest, but I think it's just a motivation to others here that never give up, meet as many as possible, and because you learn also for those that turn down the story, because you need to counter and meet those arguments, and you learn quite a lot. And not only investors, but many stakeholders out there. Could be KOLs, could be many others. You really need to meet as many as possible. You really learn a lot. So I think, I was considering, is it worth to take this meeting? But it is. So don't turn down meetings.
Paid out in the end. Yeah. Jens, is this also your do you also perceive yourself as a long distance runner? I know you are somewhat of a what do you call it, cross-country skier with some certain skills, but what about your stamina in terms of financing?
Well, that's a good question. It remains to be seen. No, just to go with Hans here on this one, because I think that's a critical. It will take time, and you will need to meet and have that openness to learn in terms of, okay, what are they hearing, and what's good, what's not good, what are we not telling, or what are we telling and they are not perceiving in the right way, or what we believe to be in the right way. So I think that meet and learn. And here also now actually we give Johan a lot of shout outs here today, but I'll give him a really good one, and that is because I've had interactions with Johan on topics, and what is super appreciated, and that's not always the case, is if they're not interested, I want the feedback. I want to learn what was it that attracted you and not attracted you, so that we can then, if nothing else, go back home and generate evidence that will make them interested the next time around. There are way too many Johans in the world, if I'm going to be a bit controversial, that do not do that. That just disappear. You get ghosted, even though you might have had a conversation or an introduction. So just that time, because then we can go back and do better, and then maybe there's an opportunity next time around.
I remember the first panel discussion I moderated with you, Carl. The first thing you said was, stay the hell away from venture capital. Do you still have that opinion, the public market being what it is right now?
It's a bit out of context, but I would say that initially, if you can survive with family and friends, it's better because they don't sort of interfere. We heard that venture capital is smart money. I would challenge that a lot, but after a while, you need so much cash that you need funding from venture cap, absolutely. But we try to do that as late as possible. Now, Pain Trainer is in scaling, for example. We need venture capital to go to the US market, but we've done quite well so far with family and offices. But I just want to comment on the requirement for companies getting funding from. It's so different because pharma is a expectation. You expect this to be a big success. And in the diagnostic, you have to show clinical validity, you have to show analytical validity, you have to show a plan for reimbursement. You have to come much further to get partners in the US, for example. And especially in digital, you basically have to have a product. And so it's very different what the venture capitalists require from the different companies in the different markets. And I think that's extremely important to realize, because it's super that you got these huge investment coming in from abroad, and that's because of the expectation, obviously, that the company will do extremely well. In diagnostic, you have to show that you're doing well. So yeah, it's a big difference.
And being then Swedish and coming from the Nordics, having formed various kinds of companies, when you speak to investors today, for example, US investors, and you have a digital product now, how are you perceived? How do you believe? Because they have a huge tech scene and health tech scene in the US. So are you a small fish in a huge pond there?
Probably, but I mean, you have to believe in yourself. You don't go there. So we just have to show that we are better than the other ones, and we are in many cases. And I mean, and also in the US in particular, when you talk to the hospitals, their main interest is, as it should be, how do we make money, and then how can we publish this, and is it good for the patients? It's actually, and you would think it's different in Sweden, but it's not. It's the same. How can we get reimbursed for what we do? Can we publish, and is it good for the patients? So, and if you know the rule of the game, it's much easier. And again, if you don't believe that you are better than the other ones, you stay home.
Okay. We have a keynote tomorrow titled "Go Big or Stay Home." So there's some truth in that, I'm sure. So. Have you ever been forced to adapt your business model or your way of thinking when you were going internationally and meeting with the counterparts there? And at what point did you realize that my approach just doesn't work here? Has that happened to you? Has it happened to you, Carl?
I mean, one example is in a diagnostic company we started. We went to CMS. We got a level of pricing, and then suddenly National Academy of Science came out with a policy paper 2022 about diverse representations. And since our test was only good for Caucasian, and going to the US with that one, immediately there was a stop in the reimbursement because 30% are Hispanics and blacks. We didn't know the market enough, and it was a big mistake. And so you have to go back and redo the test, and it took another year or two. And now it's going very well in the US. But that's a typical example of not knowing your market. And most, I mean, here in Europe, everybody's sort of, not really, but are Caucasians. And the samples we get from the hospitals are from Caucasians. So know your market, and in particular in the US.
Jens, have you been forced to adapt quickly or think on your feet, so to speak?
Not necessarily, no, but we try to take an approach where we explore alternative avenues from the get-go. So rather than this is the way we want to do it, then no, can there be different ways? So if there is a bandwidth to do it, then let's explore that, which is sort of, for example, one of the reasons why we did meet with you one, because, well, this could be a different way of taking this asset forward, wouldn't maybe be our natural sort of way forward, but let's explore, because you never know in the end which way, which deal, which agreement will be the best.
And Hans, was that ever your experience? And for example, when talking to the investors that took forever to decide to invest in your company, did you at any point, you were mentioning you learn a lot from these meetings, and did you ever feel like, okay, we're going to have to rethink this quite a lot, or was it still just incremental changes?
I think it's a reiteration process. I mean, the storytelling, which you mentioned, I mean, you refine it all the time. I think in short, I think we haven't really adapted to, I mean, we have always had the focus on going to the US. Now we opened a subsidiary there as well, and the CEO and investors. I think so we have moved in that direction. Now we are a public company in the Nordics, so one of our key peers, Pliant, they have brought in $500 million. We have brought in $50 million, which is sizable in the Nordic context, but we are still competing on getting our drugs to the patients as quickly as possible. So of course that is, it's a tough challenge, because I think because of lack of resources relative to others, we have to cut corners, and we have to cut the right corners, so to say, in order not to come in a kind of lose momentum and time. I think maybe just one additional comment to the NS deal. One consideration that we did also when we went to Japan was to get the external validation, which you mentioned is important, and also not to sell the company without selling the company, to keep all options for the future, for a European deal or a global deal, where the Japanese rights will not be a poison pill, so not exclude a global deal in the future ex-Japan. So that was very important as part of our focus on the US, or the growth in the US.
Yeah. And the title of this panel was Deal Making in a Global Context. So that's really to the point there, that to make sure that you, like you mentioned earlier when we were talking before this, that one deal is not a poison pill for the bigger markets or the global scene, so to speak. The timer is flashing red. I know that there was a slight altercation of the program because of one presenter falling ill. So I think we have a couple more minutes. Am I correct?
Yes.
Or am I just guessing? They're showing a lot of fingers up in the control room, so I think we have a few more minutes. So I mean, I think most people here are here to learn, or to get their prejudice overturned, or get their worst hopes confirmed. But if you were to share the most valuable advice you could give from where you are at, from your experiences, from your respective standpoints with your companies right now, to someone who is sort of starting out, maybe they have what they think is a great product, they have a good team, they have some money left at least in the bank to go forward, but they want to go out in the world now and try the wings, so to speak. What would be your best advice to them? If we can start with you, Hans.
I think, from the CFO perspective, I think, capital structure and owners is, of course, one of the key focus areas for me. I think it takes a long time. Our lead drug was developed in 2004, and we're now entering phase 2B studies. So we're covered by orphan drug and some other, but the composition of matter patent expires this year, so it takes time. I think of the end goal early, so you know how much capital will be needed. You need to go out and meet as many as possible, interact with multiple stakeholders, speak around with other companies, look at financial advisors. I mean, be critical there and speak with other companies when they raise capital of experience there, and meet as many as possible, because you learn so much from every meeting. But it of course takes a lot of time and effort. But I think be out there as much as possible is my key learning. And also, I think from a financing perspective, I mean, patient capital is so important. Think of getting those key investors invested, committed. They will support you. I mean, HealthCap has been with us since 2018, very committed to the company, supportive. And HBM Partners, a Swiss specialized investor, has been with us since 2017. And they of course have a great name in that network, and they will bring in others as well. So I think it's focus on getting those key investors on board, and that will make life easier.
2004, wow, you are indeed a long distance runner. So Jens, what would your best advice?
Best is a strong word. I mean, the easy solution would be to say, I agree with everything Hans said.
Oh, it would be boring too.
No, I thought it was quite insightful. So,
yeah, but to copy his would be boring.
I want to pick on Hans here. No, if I take a slightly different angle, and this is going to sound a bit obvious to some extent, but I think from a kind of a partnering, deal making, if we go back to that topic, two elements. One, patience. Sort of be patient if you can in finding your partner, because you only get to pick it once. So you want to find the right one. But then the other part, which I've seen a number of times, is that when you spend time, that sounds a bit obvious, spend time on the agreement, make sure the agreement incentivizes both in the right direction, in the right way. I've seen agreements that looked quite good when signed, but maybe doesn't incentivize the other partner to kind of move with the right speed, or move in the right direction, or prioritize the asset as much as they could. So try to spend a bit of time on ensuring that there is a proper win-win for both, because otherwise I was going to say, like, it's a bit like peeing in your pants. If you might get a good deal up front, it's warm and fuzzy, but it gets cold and sticky quite quickly if they are not incentivized, or it's not fit with making sure that they spend the time, effort, and money on developing it fast enough.
That was about as far as from a boring answer you could go, I think. So be patient, look through the fine print, don't pee in your pants. Okay. Carl, you have vast experience. If you should distill it all into the one advice you want to give.
It's so easy to be a moderator, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Taking notes now.
We're taking. No, I think if you look at startup companies, my absolutely best advice is realize the entire journey. Think about the exit already now, because the company goes through so many different phases, and as a founder and an entrepreneur, you can do good in one or two of the phases. So, and when I say this to startups and say, oh, exit, that's far away, but your technology and your ideas are maybe 1/3 or 1/2 of the journey. Then you have all the other regulatory, commercialization, business plan, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And that's probably not your forte to do that as a founder. So consider the entire journey and think of, when will you leave the company? What is the exit of the company? Just as a discussion point, to realize that it's a long journey. And then obviously you have to, I agree with Johan's last slide, work harder. It's a tremendous much work, and you have to have passion. That's the only thing to survive, but consider the entire journey.
Thank you very much. That's really good advice, I think. And I must, I mean, and I also have to note that Johan was spot on when he said he was happy that he was first out, because I don't think anyone has ever gotten so many references in a panel discussion. But that's just great. We are actually running out of time soon. So, but I wanted to open up. Is there anything you would like to ask these distinguished gentlemen before I let them off stage? This is making my job as a moderator even easier. I let the audience ask questions. Yeah. Do we have any specific questions, or have they already answered all of your inquiries? I think it was so brilliant and so fulfilling that everyone already knows everything. Or they might be shy, and then they can catch you in the break after the next presentation and ask you anything they like then. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
Extremely valuable and enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you.